Lucifer and God, and the creation of the matrix and the remembrance of consciousness. So in the Big Bang, before everything expands out into a multitude through polarity, duality, where there's infinite experience, perceptions, perspectives, all this vastness, all this creativity, and all of this destruction we know as death, a death process, where we must leave something behind to create something new. We flow through our eternity in consciousness. Consciousness is that direct connection to the source energy, where everything, like the breath, expands on the inhale and then contracts on the exhale. Everything is united. And our consciousness is that flow of energy that gives us a direct link. So no matter where we are in our experience, our existence, our experimentation process, our creation process, we are always going to be linked and united to the source energy. And that consciousness is that full remembrance of ourselves. And the full remembrance gives us an ability to renunciate the things that we no longer need or is no longer serving us, and also to create resolution and reconciliation. And that's kind of a revolutionary sort of stance that we have with time and space. And that also becomes this great renaissance for us as a being that's flowing through time and space here and elsewhere, and all the multitudes that we could drop into for a temporary time in the third dimension, where we have a life and death process. Fourth dimension, where we could be more eternal. And then fifth dimensional, where there is not that physical death process, right? Our life can extend for a long time, but the death process is just the transformation that we have within our life force energy that is governed by the universal laws and the sort of progressions that we have, just like the planetary progression we have on this planet. 26,000 year cycle is this complete cycle where we cross through all the 12 zodiacs to complete our totality. We have the seasonal progressions, right? We have the planet progression in the 365 days of the year, right? We have the North and South poles. They do their sort of alteration ever so often, every thousands of years or so, right? Where they sort of switch, right? Or they change access to a degree, right? Where we go through the ice age, and then we go through where the planet's getting really hot, right? All of these kinds of different expressions of creation we go through in order to connect to that expansion. So before that, there's just this source energy, right? And our consciousness comes right out of it. And then our consciousness kind of organizes itself in an orderly way, where we start to get these dimensions, and we start to get these sort of a pathway, right? A pathway into different aspects of ourself, different time and space within this universe that's so vast and so many multitudes of things, right? And there's so much possibility, right? When we come into the fourth dimension, it's like possibility, and that's why we have so many different species on this planet of like animals and insects and in this nature, because we are this earth just the mere reflection of the multitudes and the possibilities that we can access through the consciousness. But it all has an origin, and that origin is, we know, love, right? That love is that kind of total freedom. And we are constantly working our way back to love, right? In our death process, we call life review, which is basically renunciation, resolution, reconciliation, so that we can return to love, which is basically where we come full circle, right? We come out of love, we go our journey, we go here, we go there, we do this, we do that, lifetimes, all these perspectives, all these beliefs, all these perceptions, and then we eventually, through the integration of why we went through this and what did we learn from this, right? What did we gain? And what was the purpose of it? And then we transcend it back into love. And then we kind of do the whole thing over again. So people, they forget, they have amnesia. They come to earth and they forget. They have amnesia. And then, people can get very frustrated. But frustration is evolution. And the thing, when you really tap into your frustration and you really let it guide you and speak to you, it will encourage you, even push you to use your will to evolve yourself. Frustrated in a job, in a relationship, it's asking for change. It's asking for evolution. It's asking for new experience. So that will give you will, right? That will give you okay, I got to do something. I got to be determined. I got to learn something new. I got to integrate this thing, and I got to be reborn, right? So, we come into this earth, we forget, right? And the whole point of that forgetfulness in this, sort of dark age where we've been for thousands of years, where we, don't really have this, we come here and we go through this matrix, right? As we are going into the space of the womb of the mother, when we're just this energy of consciousness with the soul, and we go through the matrix, and the matrix kind of gets us off, right? It gets us off, and we'll discuss more about how it gets us off, and then that can create the forgetfulness, right? It kind of it gets us off our alignment. When we're born, we all somehow get off of this alignment, and then that can create all the confusion and the forgetfulness and what am I here to do? What's going on? Why am I choose these parents? Why did I choose this neighborhood or this, town or this geographic region, right? And the whole purpose of that focus and concentration in the forgetfulness is so that you can learn what it's like to get into that alignment and the kind of victory and the excellence and achievement of getting into that alignment. Right? And that builds up an even stronger experience of remembrance, right? A stronger experience of remembrance when you are born. All of us are born and we feel this misalignment, okay? And even a lot of women, the C-sections where it's the doctor basically determines the day the child will be born, where the child doesn't get to decide. That's the matrix. Right? For me, I was born, very, I wanted to be born my time, my way, and I was born a week before my mother was going to go in to get the induced labor. And it was on a particular day that was scheduled all by the doctor, right? When I would come into this life, right? And that's the matrix, where the matrix kind of gets you off your alignment, because you as a soul, you know what you're doing. You're in this perfection. So the matrix is the thing that gets you off alignment. So then you're off this alignment. You're wait a minute, I forget. I'm confused. It's not really flowing the way I wanted it to flow, right? It's not really going the way I wanted it to go, or this perfection, or, that it's not in this perfect alignment, right? It's not this perfect birth. It's not this perfect death, right? So it makes it more complicated, more complex. And the matrix can kind of use that for its advantage, right? but we can use it for our advantage in the way that we can build a strong focus and concentration on remembrance. And when we do start to unveil and unravel the remembrance, it's going to be even stronger than if we came in and it was just all this perfection, and eventually, kind of doing that again and again, all these thousands, millions, aeons, and eventually we wouldn't really learn, a strong learning we wouldn't have, right? Because we need that kind of matrix in some way, that obstacle to a certain degree to kind of, put a light under us, right? A fire in us, to get learning of will. And then will gives us the wisdom, right? You need some kind of passion or determination or, focus, really. Because all of these virtues is just immense focus. Either it's patience, determination, dedication. All of that is like basically you're really focused on the remembrance of yourself, your true self. And, what really puts people towards that is the matrix, the obstacles, the imbalances, the being off the alignment. When you're born in your childhood, it can throw you way off. Because you take on the samsara cycles of the mother trauma, the father trauma, and then you can kind of relay them and repeat them and regurgitate them, and it doesn't feel right, and it makes you feel sick, or it makes you really frustrated, right? And then that kind of puts you on this path where you got to focus, you got to concentrate on remembrance, and like, what is that, And then at the time you have to integrate. You got to integrate, the why, I decided this mother, this father, and you got to go deep into that. And that's a renunciation process, a resolution process, a reconciliation, or a redemption process, really. That you do for self, that you can even, do with the relationships that you have around you. And then you get into this space of wisdom, right? But will is before wisdom, right? Like, that's the forgetfulness. It's like the perfection is like, we're just born with perfect wisdom, right? And some people are, right? And in many ways, but what gives us a stronger sense of remembrance, like a stronger, like, life force, is the will, is like the virtues, the value, the worth, the esteem that we build up through our focus. And focus always is practice. Practice is always consistency. And that will makes our wisdom even more imprinted in us in a very profound, powerful way. And then our wisdom moves into love, right? It's like that trinity. There's the will, and then that gives into the wisdom over time, and then the wisdom gives into love, right? The wisdom to love, which is the returning to love. And that's kind of like going back into the contraction, the source energy before the Big Bang, before we had all these species and this polarity and this duality and all these different perspectives and perceptions. It all kind of comes back to just the idea of wanting to be in creation and learn as much as you can from all the different things that you could possibly kind of find yourself in, right? So that's just a little bit about kind of the source energy. We come out of it, expansion everywhere, all these universes and these galaxies, and then we talk about like timelines, and we talk about the polarity, the negative, the positive, those kinds of lower dimensions or higher dimensions, and we talk about then the forgetful cycle. Right? We can call it samsara, the cycle of keep forgetting. You're not learning your lesson, you cycle again, you not learn your lesson, it's just forgetfulness, and you're frustrated, and you don't know what to do about it. And then, you can spiral downhill, in a downward spiral where it gets very heavy, it gets very dark, but you're not really understanding anything, right? You're there, but you're not understanding what you're doing, and then that samsara just can go on, and that's the matrix. It wants you to just be in that samsara, that imperfection, because if you never come into that alignment, you're never really going to have understanding, and you're always going to just be kind of, going around and doing different things again and again in different cycles, but not really having understanding, therefore not ever transcending anything, right? Never having a process of review, of renunciation, redemption, resolution, reconciliation. So you never really integrate your process of life and death. And you can't transcend, you can't evolve, you can't graduate if you don't do that. So the Matrix is, we can call it like the Lucifer, right? The Lucifer sort of experience. And basically, God is like this perfection. Okay, perfection. Everything is in order. Everything is following the order. Everything is just full remembrance, right? You have like full remembrance of who you are. You were born with full remembrance. You don't really need will. Okay, you just have wisdom and love, right? Just wisdom and love, right? And that's kind of, a lot of, higher dimensional beings just kind of have wisdom and love. They're born with remembrance. They're born with straight up consciousness. Everything they have, they need in the perfect alignment and the perfection of all of their energy systems. All of their chakras are perfectly aligned. All of the glands are secreting perfectly. They have perfect vision, perfect sight, perfect health. That's God, right? There are dimensions that have that. Like when we get into fifth dimension, there's unconditional love, and we kind of go into this imperfectly perfect is what I call it. And that's where a lot of these angels are, and basically they help us in this lower dimension, this third dimension that has a lot of forgetfulness, mostly forgetfulness, okay? Mostly a lot of matrix, mostly that, where helping us to have unconditional love so we don't get trapped here. Because the thing about the Lucifer is there's imperfect is like the labyrinth where you never really get out unless you somehow transcend it, but if you're never in alignment with yourself, with the universe, you're never going to have that transcendence because you're never going to have real understanding. Right? So the angels are kind of like that unconditional love where they help you to remember at least that, compassion for yourself, that you will make mistakes. When you're out of alignment with the universe, with God, with creation, with yourself, you will make mistakes. And the unconditional love of the fifth dimension, that compassion, is to help you understand that, at least that thing. Because if you don't, you may damn yourself. And it's not necessary to damn yourself because you're making mistakes. And there's big degrees and there's big sort of karmic boomerangs from that. And then there's, sort of minor mistakes. There different karma is there's bigger degree, there's lesser degree. And it depends on the passion behind it, and the destruction behind it as well, and the magnitude of that, But the unconditional love is like the angel that, accepts you as you are. Like, you don't need to hide anything. You don't need to just live in this shame. Like, when you're in the presence of the angel, everything's transparent. There is no lunar energy to hide behind. Everything is revealed. Everything. And in the presence of the angel, they hold space for you to process it and to have a remembrance of the understanding that you came into a world so imbalanced, so misaligned, because you wanted to be focused, concentrate, and have that sense of victory and achievement when you have remembrance. Like other planets, they're just born with remembrance, So there is no sense of victory or excellence or achievement or will. They don't have any of that, right? So it's like, yeah, you have remembrance, you have wisdom, and it's just kind of nonchalant. But when you have that will, it makes it even more like creatively, empowered. It makes it like very creatively powerful because it has that life force in it. A very strong life force that you built through your focus and concentration towards remembrance, right? So, the matrix, gets us off in alignment. And that's why a lot of people who do the Lucifer conspiracy thing, podcasts or, videos or whatever platform, they usually talk about the Lucifer making everything kind of confusing, making things off, making, like, they say illusions, right? Like it's like, for example, we have 365 days of year. But in the God perfection of consciousness, we have 360 days a year. And a lot of people, you'll find that, they've discovered that Lucifer kind of makes a lot of incorrections. Okay, there's a lot of incorrections, right? But then it appears that it's correct because you're born into it. That's all you know, right? All you know is misalignment. All you know is forgetfulness. So you believe it because you don't know anything else, until you concentrate and focus, and then you start to basically bring that imperfection back into more of a perfection, more of an alignment, right? And then you have an understanding, you have more of integration, and then eventually you can even transcend these things that are you're wanting to evolve out of, right? That makes you frustrated. So Lucifer is all about imperfection. So Lucifer kind of mimicked, the God, the source energy, but then just made it off by a degree, right? So all of the calculations of the universe of God adds up to this certain equation. And then Lucifer, right, is like, I'm going to copy it exactly. But then I'm going to make the equation off by a degree, so that it's off a little bit, so that people don't entirely have the whole piece of it, right? So that they never really will come into full alignment, and that it's going to be like this game, right? Where you're going to have to figure out the puzzle, figure out the missing piece, figure out the missing link. And if you look at people all around this planet, isn't that kind of what they're doing? They're trying to figure out the missing piece, the missing link. Like, they have the equation, but it's off, and they're needing something, but they don't have that. So they can't complete the equation. So they can't figure out the theory of the universe or whatever it is, right? And that's kind of Lucifer. He's he loves games. He loves games. And he's a big gamer, and we see it as evil, right? Because why would Lucifer want to make this planet imbalanced, and then so off alignment that everyone is forgetting, and then it's just samsara, and people are trapped and keep more and more lifetimes and not understanding anything, not integrating, not transcending, and just kind of stuck here, right? And then getting a lost soul because you have no unconditional love, right? Or no sense of that, right? And then the Lucifer wants you to play the game, right? In the way that through your will, right? Through your will, because, we like to say that Lucifer is against us, that it's this evil thing, right? That is, putting us into hell, but really we are the creators. We are the God, we are the Lucifer, right? It's in us. It's not, there is no one that can just put us into hell. We do it for ourselves. Just like no one can put us into heaven, we do that for ourselves by our choices and by our focus and concentration, or by our lack of that, or our misappropriation or misunderstanding. There's all this confusion. We're dropped into it, and then we get frustrated, and then we get angry because you're I can't figure it out. Why am I not figuring it out? And that's the whole game of the Lucifer thing. It's you can figure it out. Really, Lucifer wants you to figure it out, because and then if he wouldn't exist. The game wouldn't exist if no one figured it out, right? It wouldn't be any fun if no one figured it out, right? You wouldn't learn that amazing virtues and value if you didn't figure it out. So it wants you to figure it out. It's just not going to make it easy. And that's, we have a lot of samsara in the way that people have so much forgetfulness, and then they all these belief systems, perceptions, and and perspectives and the confusion, and then they just kind of don't understand what is really going on, right? That the matrix wants you to use it, right? It wants you to penetrate through. And it wants you to find the missing link or the missing piece or whatever that is, to come into your own alignment. And then when you come into your own alignment, right, with the connection, your body, mind, and spirit, that kind of Trinity energy called the third dimension, you become spherical in the fifth dimension, you become the sixth dimensional balancing of the negative positive, then you transcend the duality. And that's the thing. That's like the whole excellence and the victory and the going up into the high mountains and then opening your arms wide, like hooray, right? Is that navigating through these dimensions and having the integrations of them, coming into that alignment, then starting to have that remembrance. And then the transcendence, where you really start to use the matrix in your favor rather than just the confusion and stay there, and just frustration and not really going in to yourself to ask the why, which is the integration process, right? Like, what are you here to learn? That's kind of like a main thing. Like, what are you here to learn? And there's so much to that. And a lot of it is like what I call virtues that you're here to learn. That's really will. Virtues really comes from will. It does. There's different types. There's patience, determination, resilience, tolerance, not getting angry, these type of things. Compassion, and that willfulness towards that practice is like the perfection, right? Like craftsmanship, right? When you work on your tree building skills or whatever, wood making skills, you get really good. And then it almost becomes perfect. But the thing is, even if you're the best wood maker, it will always be somewhat imperfect, because that's the matrix. Because that's where we're in. It's always, even all the greatest mathematicians, it's like it could be such a perfect thing, but then there's always something, just a little tiny thing that will be off, right? Because that's evolution. That little tiny thing that's off, that's not aligned, that's imperfect, imbalance, is the evolution, is the chance to evolve, right? It's like the car. Building a car is like, yeah, it works, but it's not as efficient. Meaning, like, we need electrical cars, an example, because that is going to be more environmentally friendly. So that's evolution. That whole thing, like, yeah, the car is perfect, the mechanics of it, but it's not imperfect, because it released a lot of carbon dioxide into the, atmosphere that's really poisonous. So we got to figure out that, right? That's the same thing with us. Even when we think of the Buddhist who's the most perfected, the Dalai Lama still has an imperfection, still has a practice, still is practicing something, still evolving into something, is still the student, right? Dalai Lama is still the high student, really. That's what any master is. And that's the matrix, in that understanding of that. The student is like you're in the matrix. The consciousness is like you're the teacher, but you're both. And the Lucifer is like the student. You're learning from distraction. You're learning from disturbance. You're learning about choice and free will and will, right? And the kind of choices you make, right? And that's why Lucifer also, we think of it like the Middle East, right? We think of the Anunnaki, for example, with the history of the planet and the Middle East. And Middle East is like a lot of Lucifer type of, the Matrix was created from there, basically, right? We think of the Matrix, that area of like created in like the Middle East, even with, India, going on to the Mediterranean region, even to North Africa, this whole area, even some places in Asia, where it expands out this matrix. And basically, it's that area has a lot of will. The same time of the Lucifer, the imbalances, the distortions, distraction, at the same time were powerful practices of creativity, powerful practices of training the mind, right? Powerful wisdom in those areas. Like the information of this planet of high wisdom is stored within the area of the Middle East and some places of Asia, going to Turkey, Pakistan, and going to India, and I said Mediterranean, right? And there's powerful wisdom. So it's like there's something about when the Matrix was created, kind of this place that we call the navel point of the earth, which is the Middle East, the navel point. The same time as the navel was imbalanced, okay, which happens when your body, mind, spirit is off alignment, and then it also makes you hormonally imbalanced, and then that causes disturbances in your body, right? It doesn't make you feel right. You feel like something's off. And it messes you up, like even psychologically imbalanced, and all of that kind of distortion. At the same time the navel became imbalanced, the navel became very willful to become balanced. And that will is what cracked open high levels of creativity through wisdom, which is basically expressions of the body, expressions of the mind, expressions of the voice, right? We think of the Middle East, this whole area is like high level of creativity. In India and even Mediterranean, we think of like, Italy and the Greek and all of that kind of stuff. It's high level of wisdom. Even when we think of Asia and going into that area, high levels of wisdom through will. Because the Matrix was the thing that was like really pushing people out of their box, pushing people out of their comfort, pushing people like out of the just perfect all the time, and getting them to evolve beyond that and to see what they could discover, right? To think in new ways. And that became a creative explosion in this area, huge renaissance, right? And of course, that expanded out into all places of this planet, but we really think of this Middle East and like this whole large geographic region as the navel point of the earth. And right now, the navel point is very imbalanced. We think, in this modern 21st century, and that's why there's so much fighting and battling going on, is because the navel point is not entirely, it's not adjusted. And then because they're also connected to the kidneys, when we have adrenal fatigue, our adrenals, very important. It creates a major circulation within our whole body. And when we have that fatigue because we're wearing them down, through too much heat, too much anger, that type of thing, too much energy, it can cause a major, like the body gets really heavy and ill and sick, right? And susceptible to a lot of disease, right? And those area of what we think of the Middle East is connected to that, right? So, we correct the navel point through our will, right? Which is like, will is walking. That helps your navel point balance. Will is doing squats if you're postpartum, right? Or prenatal, right? Which basically helps your navel align so that you're in hormonal alignment, you're in more of alignment with the pelvic floor, and that makes it more easeful to have birth, and also to recover from the, like a alchemical explosion that is having a child. So we have, what do we learn from like the Lucifer? We learn will. We learn focus, powerful intention to understand. Okay? Like, again, if we're born with remembrance, we don't really have that powerful intention to understand. because we already understand. We're born with it, so we're kind of just like wisdom, love all day. But, this planet has been a warrior planet in our past history with a lot of stuff we've experienced, and even extraterrestrial and all these different civilizations for a reason. Because that's the fire in us that has allowed us to evolve and to have excellence and to be brilliant and to very quickly, like through a quantum leap and accelerated growth as a human species, be able to evolve and not just stay complacent, where we're not really like evolving anything. We're just kind of, this light and love, right? Forever and ever and ever. And I think, ever and ever, it's fun. But then I think people, that Lucifer was like, okay, let's learn other things. Let's kick it up a notch. Let's make it more complex, and see if you can figure it out. Right? And the thing is, it's intended for you to figure it out. It's not intended for you to just keep hitting walls and hitting walls. Right? But it's going to require a certain practice. Right? And I know it can seem like such a test of, such a unfair thing, right? Because it's how do you understand if you have total forgetfulness of who you are, what the universe is, and then you have all these programs in your head that say that you're stupid and that you're whatever, and that just makes it so unfair and so difficult. And that's the thing, the distortion as the polarity happens, the duality, negative, positive, in the second dimension of ourselves, where we started to identify in contrast and comparison, red, violet, in the differences between a tree and a bug and an animal, right? The real, when we think of the evil, is that the people who participate in the distortions, play in the game, but then they forget the source energy. They forget that they need to transcend as well. So then they get lost to the distortions, right? They become imperfect too much, and the imbalance. They become really confused. And they forget the original intent of it, right? Which is to kind of, create a challenge, basically. To create a challenge. That's basically what it is. But then you forget your original intent, and then you get wrapped up into it. You could take it too far, and then you become a destroyer of yourself. And then that creates all of this being trapped, being lost to this matrix, right? And you're just zapped into it, and you feel bound, right? You feel bound, you feel imprisoned, enslaved, all these things. Because then you've lost a connection to source energy, which isn't, you're always connected, but you've kind of created you have gotten too much into it. You've given too much to it. You've gotten too serious about it, really. You've gotten it too offended by it, too serious. And then that is like you've given your power to it. You now believe that it has power over you. And that's the lost thing. That's the disturbance that is what we think is really evil. Because it's like a challenge now becomes like it's controlling, or it's taking our power, it's taking something from us. And that means that we need to focus, we need to concentrate on the remembrance of ourselves, so that we can understand the bigger picture and not take it so seriously to the point where we're creating all of these cycles of just, this continued fighting with it, this continued fighting and fighting and fighting, with it, that doesn't transcend. We don't integrate anything in that. We definitely don't transcend anything. We just keep doing different lifetimes of the same fighting and fighting. And it wear and tears our energy. And it takes a lot of energy to do that, you know. So the integration is like asking the why, wanting to educate yourself, wanting to be a masterful student so that you can integrate and then transcend and use your energy, your life force, your will for actually something that is wisdom, which is like, wisdom is not dogma. It's not really knowledge. You know, wisdom is like, you have a neutral position. You know, you're not like Lucifer, the devil, angel is the high best thing. Because then you're going to say anyone who looks like Lucifer, anyone who's caught in distortion or is confused is evil. So if your daughter is confused and they're in distortions, they're going through mistakes, experiences that are challenging, you're going to call them Lucifer? You know, so that's why the neutral position is wisdom, where you can transcend, you can integrate, you can have a higher understanding, and that kind of, you use the matrix for your benefactor, for your victory, your excellence, your high will. So consciousness becomes a lot more fire in it, right? And that's why this earth, you know, human beings, we are so, in the view of, you know, extraterrestrials, we are such creative life force. Even the Middle East, that whole area that expands out into Asia and in Mesopotamia and North Africa and India, it's high creative life force. A lot of Eastern powerful ideas of Ayurveda, of Tai Chi, Qigong, yogic science and technology. So many creative, just life force came out of that information center of wisdom, right? And that's what we are, because we have that will, because of the challenge, because we are born with forgetfulness. So then it makes it like a game. You know, each lifetime it's like a game to figure out if you're going to have this remembrance or not. And then you keep trying it again and again. And the samsara is like you keep trying it again and again. And you keep, getting caught up, putting your energy in the wrong places, right? But in the thing is, all we have to do is integrate, learn, really ask ourselves questions and answer those questions by being really willing to learn. Particularly learn from nature, because nature is consciousness. Tree, mountain, ocean. Learn from nature if you want to really be a student of wisdom, of neutral stance. Because nature is not like looking at human like you evil and you good. Nature doesn't really look, oh, this elephant is good, but this lion is evil. It doesn't really do that. It's kind of not in duality. It's not in polarity. It has it, but it's not like caught up in it like we are, because we're in a third dimension trying to get the missing link, right? From the missing link is the integration transcendence that will help us to move beyond just the duality, positive and, negative, battling, fighting, right? And come into the third aspect, that trinity, where you're neutral, and then you can start to feel the consciousness of yourself raise up and then expand beyond your limitation, right? Which is like your dogma, your stubbornness, your this is how it is, no, that's how it is, and come into more spherical, that everything is kind of moving into a multitudes and it's changing, but there is a core to it. There is a law, there is a perfection to it. And, it has a lot to do with our focus, our concentration, our practice of the virtues, and those virtues leading into a discovery, right, of nature and the revelations we have about relationships. And the review and the renunciation, redemption, resolution, reconciliation that we start to have. So, when we connect to nature, we're connecting to pure consciousness, a tree. That's why the Mu people, which were associated with the called Lemurian warriors, the Lemurian priests and priestess, wisdom keepers, protectors of nature, okay, of the natural element. They were very much about consciousness, high levels of consciousness. While we think of the Matrix, right, the Lucifer, we think of Anunnaki, which created a lot of this matrix we call hierarchy, slave system, this whole game where haves and haves nots, and I have control and power, and it's just a huge challenge, right? It's a very difficult challenge, right? It seems almost impossible to surmount. When we even think of the time of Jesus, it's like so much suffering. It seems almost impossible for humanity to like evolve beyond this. But Jesus represented the transcendence, represented a human that was able to break through, and creating that portal, that path for many people. And now today, millions, maybe billions are following in that path of breaking through immense suffering, right? And he was that thing, that person who figured out the game, right? And he won. But it was very challenging, right? But he did it so that it would be easier for us to do it, right? Easier for us to learn the game of the matrix and the samsara and constant suffering and cycling again and again and never ends, right? That we could break through, right? That's why we give so much reverence, because him, as well as other beings who, like him, were front line, okay, that basically did a lot of work for us, just for humans. It could be easier for them, right? There's a lot of see that, because in the Dark Age, the Matrix was almost so heavy loaded that it was almost like you could never it was like Jesus' time, almost impossible to figure the game out and win, excel and graduate beyond the matrix and the distortion and the imbalances and the misalignment that causes a lot of frustration, anger, and then even destruction based off of that, because you don't understand what you're doing. You're just fighting. Don't know why you're fighting. You don't understand the reason behind it, and you have definitely no understanding about what is the root of this issue. Right? It's just surface level, like combat, physical fighting, but there's no real understanding, therefore it never ends. It's never reaching a review, a redemption, reconciliation, resolution, and revolution that transcends these things and brings back more of the neutral stance for consciousness to be restored and love to be returned back to, right? Where we feel healing, where we feel bliss, and then where we also can recover ourselves and be anew, right? And rewrite our past and our future. So nature is like the Mu people we think of like Hawaii and the Polynesian and Easter Island, in the Pacific, these kind of islands that were all linked in like this kind of massive continent, which linked basically all these little islands, larger, smaller, and these beings, they were pure consciousness. They didn't have matrix. They didn't have hierarchy. They didn't have slave system. They didn't have games. They really didn't have challenges. They were born with remembrance, full remembrance of the perfection of the universe and how to basically be with it, right? But then, the Matrix was like the world. Like you go into the city and it's full of billboards. It's full of like so much duality, negative, positive, full of so much like it's like a game, like a labyrinth, like a maze, and you have to figure out your way through it. And there's so much confusion in it as well, right? And it's confusion, it's imbalance, it's it just, something feels off about it, right? Something feels off. Usually there's a pretense, there's something fake, there's something that is false, right? It's misleading, it's misguiding, it's like a false god, a false prophet. That's like the world, right? So the best thing that we can do to help ourselves come into alignment is to connect to nature. And that's kind of what's going to really help us to have those like complete balancing of the chakra, of the gland, of the body, even of the mind. You know, a lot of people, the split personality, the disorder with the mind, this disorder, that disorder, it has a lot to do with the misalignment. But the thing is, there's a remedy, you know, going into nature, like forest bathing, you know, is like getting into nature, getting into that alignment, and then you will start to naturally remember. But it will come through like a more mystic channel, like consciousness's mystic channel, or like a plant, connecting to the plant, you know, energy, the tree energy, the animal energy, like the animal totem, like the Native Americans. They didn't have a matrix at all. So when the matrix came over to North America from Europe, they were like, what is this? What are you trying to do to us? They didn't understand at all, because they weren't playing that game. They weren't playing a game at all. They were transparent. They were living like the Mu people of the Pacific, you know, islands. They were living in one with nature, in source energy, like in alignment, in this sort of perfection. But of course, on Earth, it would be imperfect, because everything about nature is also imperfect. But they managed to uphold and to integrate enough experience to have that ability to know how to be in balance with your emotions, know how to be in balance with your mind through the changes of time and space. And that's wisdom, to be able to know how to do that. So when the Matrix came, the Europeans came, there was so much confusion, there was so much disorder, there were so much like imbalances that, you know, the native people were like, oh my gosh, right? And then the Matrix wanted them to conform and force them to be like the Matrix. So, you know, if we want to, that's why the native people of North America, South America, Australia, shamans of Middle East, of Turkey, you know, these sort of indigenous seeming people, or Native American people, native people, they're seen as the sort of portals. They're like portals to the source energy, portals to higher consciousness. And they are basically elemental beings. They're very connected to nature. They can speak on behalf of nature, and they can speak on behalf of all of creation through the channel of nature. And of course the Matrix didn't want that, right? So again, the fighting with that, right? The trying to remove that, because it didn't, basically the Lucifer didn't want anything to involve perfection, alignment, and balance. It was anti all of that, perfection, balance, and alignment. So of course it would go after and fight with anything that was, right, as a way to make it more complicated than it needed to be, right? Or you know, this kind of, but it also created a lot of like practice on this planet. Like if you've been here a couple times, many times, you've definitely probably practiced a lot with will, just to not only survive, but eventually get to a place where you can really exalt yourself and excel in ways of really victory, and create what you really came here to create, and not get confused and lost and distracted. Because one of the greatest things, you know, is the focus, particularly on nature, on the natural world, you know, kind of moving beyond the world, going into the natural world, the nature, the elemental, the wisdom that you get from the tree deep in the earth, from the mountain, from the ice, from the ocean, because that will give you the truth. That will give you history way before the Matrix, and that will give you the origin, right? Beyond duality, beyond good and bad, Lucifer and angel. But it'll give you the perspective that the demon and the angel are actually partners, and that they're working kind of hand in hand, and in a way to one, the Lucifer is the challenger, okay, and willpower. Okay, that's why Lucifer has everything to do with this root chakra. Okay, everything root chakra. Challenge of survival, these type of things. Challenge, that's survival. Challenge. It's challenge to survive. You have to eat and exercise and drink water, right? But the angel represents represents the joy of expression, of, Renaissance. Joy of expression is Renaissance. So they're partnership, right? Where, one will challenge you to, in many ways. Like if you're mediocre or complacent and you're not evolving according to your joy of expression that's been wanting to come through you because of your fears or because of limitation or because you just don't have fire in you to do it, the challenge will kind of, make it known you need to start moving, go now. And that challenge will be sometimes eye-opening and, abrupt. It's like the Pluto, people who work with that Pluto energy or live on their Pluto line in astrocartography. Usually they're working with kind of the Lucifer energy and the way that a lot of challenges are going to put a lot of fire and a lot of will, not only to survive, but also to be victorious in the remembrance of your consciousness. Because when you're faced with death, like most people with near-death experience, it kind of forces you to evolve. It forces you to take your life and do something with it. To do something with it in a way that's going to make you feel in your life review that you actually were you came into full remembrance. You were creative. You were in Renaissance. You were in joyous expression, right? And to not delay and let distraction, let your whole life go by and you didn't even do anything, right? Because then the samsara is you probably are going to just be reborn and same thing, right? It's your, so it kind of puts this fire in you no, now's the time. Your future is now, not next decade, 20. It's death can happen any moment. So that's kind of the reminder to remember yourself is Lucifer kind of is this thing that reminds you the ticking clock of death, the Grim Reaper. You will die. It's going to happen. So it's time to die with some royalty, die with some nobility, die with something you've learned, die with some kind of wisdom that you've achieved, die with some kind of exaltation of your spiritual body, right? It's kind of like that thing, die with some heart and soul, right? Right? It's it really, when you see that Grim Reaper, everyone is scared, but really it's wake up to the fact that you will die, and it's time to work the matrix into your favor, right? Take the challenge and let it teach you something. Integrate, ask question, critically think, common sense, right? Practice, focus, right? Because you only have a certain amount of time. If it was eternal, we probably wouldn't need as many challenges. If we just had 200, 500 years, we wouldn't need, but we do. So I think right now with the imbalances of the Dark Age moving into the Aquarian Age is that we have such a strong matrix, and a lot of people do not understand it. And because we have such a strong matrix, and really 20% of the population is working with the remembrance of the consciousness, the real expansion, not just a little bit here or there, but the real integration of it, not just the book, reading the book, okay, but the actual integration, their process of kind of becoming the joyous expression, living that out. It's 20% are doing that. So it's the real difficulty, very similar to Jesus' time, where it seems so impossible for people to move beyond suffering and samsara. But the real breakthrough on this planet is to be able to sort of create a sort of balancing, okay, of the matrix. You know, the matrix will be here because it's kind of, you know, enough people on this planet participate in the matrix because they want to have some kind of victory in their Sachic record, some kind of victory in remembering themselves and the will and the practice and the wisdom that's like on fire that they've learned. Where they've learned in this 3D, it's very powerful. When you learn limitless in this 3D limitation, it's very high victory. And that's why a lot of people do the 3D challenge, and some barely make it. Like, some barely make it. Like, they get it, and then, you know, they leave the planet, right? Like, as they get it. Because it's the 3D, you know, that holding of that infinity in this 3D matrix is not easy, right? And I mean, it's not easy in the way that because of the dark age and where we've been, and how the matrix has been the prevailing kind of thing, seeming to almost be ruling people, dictating, deciding people's fate. So to be having no fate and pursuing your creative destiny, it's like, you know, you're surrounded by the matrix. You have to be able to have a real understanding of how to maneuver through the matrix appropriately, which is like, you need a high level of intuition and psychic ability to do that. But anybody can do it, and many people are doing it at this time, and that's why this whole planet is having rebirthing. I mean, humanity is not the planet, but humanity is having a whole rebirthing, because more and more people through the continuity from the community are starting to remember have the remembrance of their soul agreement with this planet and what their creative destiny, their joyful expression, the limitless supply of energy, and are starting to really focus on their evolution. And they're frustrated, they're angry, yes, but there are many people who are really focusing on asking, why am I frustrated? Why am I angry? And are starting to integrate their childhood, integrate the stuff of the matrix, such as bullying in high school or college or middle school, integrating all of the experiences and coming to a place of life review, redemption, resolution, reconciliation, and going into this radical resurrection of love, right? And it's like, whoa, it's huge quantum leap we're having on this planet, like huge accelerated growth, because enough people now and moving forward are having that, making that choice, because it's really a choice. The matrix you can drop into this earth, into poverty and stuff, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay there. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we need to have a focused concentration, so we can work towards a remembrance, right? And the focused concentration on basically alignment, okay, a balance is the thing that's really gonna like open up a lot of not only your hidden talents and gifts that are powerful resources that can really bring goodness into your life, but also understanding of how the true nature works. Not so much the matrix. The matrix copied it and then made it like off, right? But understand before the matrix. Understand the origination. The matrix is not the origination. It copied the origination, right? And then made it off to basically, it's kind of like when people plagiarize. They copy the patent idea, but then they make it a little bit off the original, so that it can't be like, they can't sue you, right? Same thing with the Matrix. It kind of copied all the perfection of the universe and then made it somewhat imperfect so that it could be like its own thing, right? And then we kind of drop into it with this fighting spirit to try to figure it out, right? And a lot of us don't make it. A lot of us do. A lot of times it takes a long time. But in the Dark Age, because the Matrix is very heavy and strong, it's a lot more challenging. So that's why we have to have spiritual guides, fifth dimensional beings, because we as third dimension, we cannot do it on our own. Not in the Dark Age. It's very challenging. We have to have spiritual guides. We have to have elders. We have to have teachers. We have to have the golden chain of wisdom keepers, wisdom holders, right? Who've done it, who've been there, and who have had the link to the original kind of earth, to nature before the Dark Age, before the Matrix, wanted to, be in everywhere and be the kind of the primary experience of this planet. But when we transcend it, we see the origination, we see the original teaching, the original order in the laws, and we find that it is perfect, right? But it's the focus on balance and alignment is going to help us to have that remembrance. So yes, I wanted to share this kind of massive revelation that I've had about Lucifer and God, and coming from a neutral position and what we really learn and kind of what's really going on. So I hope that this challenges you in a way of liberation, because the one thing about your focused concentration, when it's on alignment and balance, you're on a path of liberation. And liberation is where you take Lucifer, which is the great challenge, the Matrix, and you take God, which is like joyful expression. You combine them together. So liberation is both a challenge and both joyous, because liberation is like you're challenging yourself to grow, to evolve, to be excellent, right? To learn and to graduate and to be a better student and to really understand. And then it's joyful because you get to express all the things that you've learned in a way of prosperity, in a way of creativity, in a way of generosity, in a way of basically creating something that is wealthy, that fills your life with so much goodness, right? And goodness, I mean as like goodness as in like supporting the creative destiny of all living things, and the return to love. That's really what goodness is, the returning to the love, and the supporting of the co-creation that allows us all to fulfill that creative destiny within many different lifetimes, right? And the goodness is like you're feeding someone's infinity, you're feeding someone's totality, you're feeding someone's like their chance, their opportunity to heal, to grow, to integrate, to transcend, to basically have a greater understanding of their potential. Right? And that's what goodness is, when you feel that you're not only in your potential, higher potential, more limitless, beyond survival, more liberation type potential, but then you're also giving out, extending it out to helping other people uncover their potential as well, to liberate themselves and basically work more in greater understanding so that they can have more a sense of like soul's journey completion, having completion, right? Not having samsara and keep doing it again and again and again, and the shame and like guilt and all this regret and like, I didn't do anything I wanted to do, right? And actually having the ability to have that soul's journey completion. And it's really an internal, it's not like I get this, that, and the other. Its achievement is through the how many people you help reach potential in. It's not I do this, that, and the other, right? It's also about your creativity. And it's about your offering. It's about your evolution that you give towards this planet, towards the people that, you know, that are here, and working towards more of their wish fulfillment, their healing, their prayers answered, right? That's what we call that kind of soul's journey completion, is when you bring out more of the soul energy of the planet, the soul energy of the animal, of the person. You have more of the soul experience, the soul relationship. And the excellence, the high achievement, is when you're basically have that remembrance of the soul kind of birthing itself into this third dimension to basically co-create in ways of discovery and learning and challenge, in a way of like to in a way to be a healer for yourself, right? To change with the changes of the seasons, change with your evolution, with what you're needing to integrate and process in this life, and then what you need to transcend or let go of or release, or, you know, kind of move away from, right? And then that victory is like, you do that and you feel that sense of freedom, because you know, you may not be the richest person or this, that, and the other, but you have this it's like you have this ability to maneuver through this earth in a way where you have understanding of how it works, right? And therefore you know how to kind of use the matrix instead of letting it use you. You know how to be responsible. You know how to be resourceful, right? You even know how to manifest things that you want through an understanding of how alignment works, how, you know, like vibration works, which are laws of God and the perfection of everything. And you understand that, you use that and you perfect it. That's that kind of soul's journey completion.